Black magic retreated before the light of Christianity, Rome was conquered by the cross, and prodigies took refuge in that dark circle with which the barbarous provinces enringed the new Roman splendor. Among a large number of extraordinary phenomena there is one which was verified in the reign of the Emperor Hadrian. At Tralles in Asia, a young and noble girl named Philonium, originally of Corinth and daughter of Demostrates and Charito, was captivated by Mahadas, a youth of mean condition. Marriage was impossible, for, as it has been said, Philonium was noble, being, moreover, an only daughter and a rich heiress. Mahadas was a man of the people and kept a tavern. The passion of Philonium was increased by difficulties. She escaped from her father's home and took refuge with Mahadas. An illicit intercourse began and continued for 6 months, when the girl was discovered by her parents, rescued by them and sequestered carefully. Measures were now projected for leaving the country and removing her to Corinth. But Philonium, who had visibly wasted since separation from her lover, was seized thereupon with a languishing disorder, neither smiling nor sleeping, and refusing all nourishment. It came to pass, in fine, that she died. The parents then relinquished their determination to depart and purchased a vault, where the young girl was deposited, clothed in her richest garments. The sepulchre was situated in an enclosure belonging to the family, and no one entered therein after the burial, for pagans did not pray at the tombs of the departed. The noble family were so anxious to avoid all scandal that all the arrangements took place in secret, and Mahadas had no idea as to what had become of his mistress. But on the night following the entombment, when he was about to retire, the door opened slowly and, coming forward with lamp in hand, he beheld Philonium magnificently apparelled, but pallid, cold, and fixing him with a dreadful stare in the eyes. Mahadas ran to meet her, took her in his arms, asked 1,000 questions amidst as many caresses, and they passed the night together. Before daybreak Philonium rose up and disappeared, while her lover was still plunged in profound sleep. Now the girl had an old nurse who loved her tenderly and wept bitterly at her loss. She may have been an accomplice in her misconduct, and since the burial of her beloved, being unable to sleep, she rose frequently at night in a kind of delirium and wandered round the dwelling of Mahadas. It came about in this manner that a few days after the episode just narrated, she observed a light in the young man's chamber. Drawing nearer and looking through the chinks of the door, she recognized Philonium seated beside her lover, looking at him in silence and yielding to his embraces. In a state of distraction the poor woman ran back to awaken the mother and gave account of what she had seen. It was regarded at first as the raving of a visionary, but in the end, persuaded by her entreaties, the mother rose and repaired to the house of Mahadas. All were asleep therein and there was no answer to knocking. The lady looked through the chinks of the door. The lamp was extinguished, but a moonbeam lighted the chamber and the mother saw on a chair the draperies of her daughter and could distinguish 2 persons asleep in the bed. She was seized with fright, returned home trembling, not daring to visit the sepulchre of her child, and passed the rest of the night in agitation and tears. On the morrow she sought the lodging of Mahadas and questioned him gently. The young man confessed that Philonium visited him every night. "Why refuse her to me?" he said to the mother. "We are affianced before the gods." Then opening a coffer he showed Charito the ring and girdle of her daughter, adding, "She gave me these last night, pledging me never to belong to anyone but her. Seek therefore to separate us no longer, since we are united by a mutual promise." "Will you therefore in your turn go to the grave in search of her?" said the mother. "Philonium has been dead for these 4 days, and it is doubtless a sorceress or a strike who has assumed her likeness to deceive you. You are the spouse of death, your hair will whiten tomorrow, and the day after you also will be buried. In this manner do the gods avenge the honor of an outraged family." Mahadas turned white and trembled at this language. He began to fear on his own part that he was the sport of infernal powers. He begged Charito to bring her husband that evening, when he would hide them near his room, and at the time of the phantom's arrival, would give a signal to warn them of the fact. They came, and at the allotted hour came also Philonium to Mahadas, who was in bed, but fully clothed and only pretending to sleep. The girl undressed and placed herself beside him. Mahadas gave the signal. The parents entered with torches and uttered a great cry on recognizing their daughter. Philonium, with pallid face, rose from the bed to her full height, and said in a hollow and terrible voice, "O my father and my mother, why have you been jealous of my happiness and why have you pursued me even beyond the grave? My love had compelled the infernal gods. The power of death was suspended. 3 days only and I should have been restored to life. But your cruel curiosity makes void the miracle of nature. You are killing me a second time." After these words she fell back, an inert mass, upon the bed. Her countenance faded. A cadaverous odor filled the chamber. And there was nothing now but the disfigured remains of a girl who had been 5 days dead. On the morrow the whole town was in commotion over this prodigy. People crowded to the amphitheatre, where the history was recounted in public, and the crowd then visited the mortuary vault of Philonium. There was no sign of her presence, but they came upon an iron ring and a gilded cup, which she had received as presents from Mahatas. The corpse was in the room of the tavern, but the young man had vanished. The diviners were consulted and they directed that the remains should be interred without the precincts of the town. Sacrifices were offered to the Furies and to the terrestrial Mercury. The celestial manes were conjured and there were offerings to Jupiter Hospitalis. Phlegon, a freedman of Adrian, who was the ocular witness of these facts, and relates them in a private letter, adds that he had to exercise his authority to calm a place disturbed by so extraordinary an event, and he finishes his story with the following words: "If you think fit to inform the emperor, let me know, that I may send some of those who have been witnesses of these things." The history of Philonium is therefore well authenticated. A great German poet has made it the subject of a ballad which everyone knows under the title of The Bride of Corinth. He supposes that the girl's parents were Christians, and this gives him the opportunity to make a powerful poetic contrast between human passions and the duties of religion. The mediaeval demonographers have not failed to explain the resurrection, or possibly the apparent death of the young Greek lady, as a diabolical obsession. On our own part, we recognize an hysterical coma accompanied by lucid somnambulism. The father and mother of Philonium killed her by their rough awakening, and public imagination exaggerated all the circumstances of this history. The terrestrial Mercury, to whom sacrifices were ordained by diviners, is no other than the astral light personified. It is the fluidic genius of the earth, fatal for those who arouse it without knowing how to direct. It is the focus of physical life and the magnetized receptacle of death. This blind force, which the power of Christianity enchained and cast into the abyss, meaning into the center of the earth, made its last efforts and manifested its final convulsions by monstrous births among barbarians. There is scarcely a district in which the preachers of the gospel did not have to contend with animals in hideous forms, being incarnations of idolatry in its death throes. The Vouves, Graulis, gargoyles, Tarasques are not allegorical only. It is certain that moral disorders produce physical deformities and do, to some extent, realize the frightful forms attributed by tradition to demons. The question arises whether these fossil remains from which Cuvier built up his mammoth monsters belong really in all cases to epochs preceding our creation. Is also that great dragon merely an allegory which Regulus is represented as attacking with machines of war and which according to Livy and Pliny lived on the borders of the river Bagrata? His skin, which measured 120 feet, was sent to Rome and was there preserved until the period of the war with Numantia. There was an ancient tradition that when the gods were angered by extraordinary crimes, they sent monsters upon earth, and this tradition is too universal not to be founded upon actual facts. It follows that the stories concerning it belong more frequently to history than mythology. In all memorials of barbarian races, at that epoch when Christianity conquered them with a view to their civilization, we find a. The last traces of high magical initiation spread formerly throughout the world, and b. proofs of the degeneration which had befallen such primitive revelation, together with the idolatrous vileness into which the symbolism of the Old World had lapsed. In place of the disciples of the Magi, diviners, sorcerers and enchanters reigned everywhere. God was forgotten in the deification of men. The example was given by Rome to its various provinces, and the apotheosis of the Caesars familiarized the whole world with the religion of sanguinary deities. Under the name of Irminsul, the Germans worshipped and sacrificed human victims to that Arminius or Hermann who caused Augustus to mourn the lost legions of Varus. The Gauls referred to Brennus the attributes of Tyrannus and of Tutus, burning in his honor colossi built of rushes and filled with Romans. Materialism reigned everywhere, idolatry being synonymous therewith, as is also the superstition which is ever cruel because it is always base. Providence, which predestined Gaul to become the most Christian land of France, caused, however, the light of eternal truths to shine forth therein. The original Druids were true children of the Magi, their initiation deriving from Egypt and Chaldea, or in other words, from the purest sources of primitive Kabbalah. They adored the Trinity under the names of Isis or Ilisis, being supreme harmony. Belin or Bel, meaning the Lord in Assyrian and having correspondence with the name Adonai. Camel or Camiel, a name which personifies divine justice in the Kabbalah. Beneath this triangle of light they postulated a divine reflection, also consisting of three personified emanations, being Tutas or Tuth, identical with the Thoth of the Egyptians, and the word or formulated intelligence, then strength and beauty, the names of which varied like the emblems. Finally they completed the sacred septenary by a mysterious image representing the progress of dogma and its developments to come. The form was that of a young girl, veiled and bearing an infant in her arms. They dedicated this symbol to the Virgin who shall bear a child. The ancient Druids lived in strict abstinence, preserved the deepest secrecy concerning their mysteries, studied the natural sciences, and only admitted new adepts after prolonged initiations. There was a celebrated Druidic college at Autun, and, according to Saint Foix, its armorial bearings still exist in that town. They are azure, with serpents argent couchant, surmounted by mistletoe, garnished with acorns vert, to distinguish it from other mistletoe, it being the oak and not the mistletoe which naturally bears the acorns. Mistletoe is a parasitic plant which has fruit particular to itself. The Druids built no temples but worked the rites of their religion on dolmens and in forests. The mechanical means by which they raised such colossal stones to form their altars is even now a matter of speculation. These erections are still to be seen, dark and mysterious, under the clouded sky of Armorica. The old sanctuaries had secrets which have not come down to us. The Druids taught that the souls of ancestors watched over children, that they were made happy by their glory and suffered in their shame, that protecting genii overshadowed trees and stones of the fatherland, that the warrior who died for his country expiated all his offences, fulfilled his task with dignity, was elevated to the rank of a genius and exercised henceforth the power of the gods. It followed that for the Gauls patriotism itself was a religion. Women and even children carried arms, if necessary, to withstand invasion. Joan of Arc and Jean Hachette of Beauvais only carried on the traditions of these noble daughters of the Gauls. It is the magic of remembrances which cleaves to the soil of the fatherland. The Druids were priests and physicians, curing by magnetism and charging amulets with their fluidic influence. Their universal remedies were mistletoe and serpent's eggs, because these substances attract the astral light in an especial manner. The solemnity with which mistletoe was cut drew down upon this plant the popular confidence and rendered it powerfully magnetic. It came about in this manner that it worked marvelous cures, above all when it was fortified by the Druids with conjurations and charms. Let us not accuse our forefathers of over-great credulity herein. It may be that they knew that which is lost to us. The progress of magnetism will some day reveal to us the absorbing properties of mistletoe. We shall then understand the secret of those spongy growths which draw the unused virtue of plants and become surcharged with tinctures and savors. Mushrooms, truffles, gall on trees and the different kinds of mistletoe will be employed with understanding by a medical science which will be new because it is old. We shall cease to ridicule Paracelsus, who collected moss, usnea, from the skulls of hanged men. But one must not move quicker than science, which recedes that it may advance the further.